Resuming debate, the honourable member for Beaches East York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I wanted to comment on the fine speech from my colleague from Louis Saint Laurent. She's a member of this House, not yet old enough to serve in the Senate. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that's evidence enough in support of this motion, sufficiently compelling argument to actually rest my case on. But there is yet more evidence, so I won't rest it there. And I'm sure she and my colleague from Toronto Danforth, whose motion this is, have greater expectations of me. But if I might, Mr. Speaker, say what a pleasure it is to share the privilege of representing the citizens of the East End of Toronto with the member from Toronto Danforth. We stand back to back, Mr. Speaker, in our common cause of serving the people of the East End of the city, and I stand with him today in full support of this motion. Today's motion, Mr. Speaker, is part of a larger progressive vision and plan that we, the NDP, have for reforming the electoral and parliamentary systems of Canada. This is about bringing a more fulsome democracy to Canada, about making representation more meaningful and real, about making sure that we have a system whereby the citizens of this country can be sure that when those of us who occupy this place fail to do our job properly, they are able to remove us from this place. It is this latter point, Mr. Speaker, that is relevant, I believe, to today's motion, to this part of our democracy project. Let me say at the outset of this speech, Mr. Speaker, that it's my desire as an MP to always conduct myself in a dignified and civil manner as befitting this institution. Whatever one wants to say about the conduct and language that's appropriate to this place doesn't really matter, because there are, in any case, some very clear, explicit expectations of my constituents on me for my conduct. But a speech about the Senate, Mr. Speaker, poses a huge challenge to that, because the subject matter is not, in fact, dignified and not civil. In fact, the institution has become ugly, crude, and sordid, and an argument for its abolition cannot avoid but shine a light on that and speak in plain terms about that. As a new MP, Mr. Speaker, I'm not so used to and familiar with this place yet that the Senate and the Senator seems normal to me. There is something quite unusual about this collection of people who have made this place home till kingdom come, or 75 years old. This ought to be a place where we are able to be only by the will and grace of those who sent us here. We ought to feel lucky about that. We ought to never take for granted the privilege we have to be in this House to represent the views of our constituents on the important issues of the day. And we ought to be well aware every day that that privilege is in our constituents' hands to withdraw or withhold should we slip and fail in our duty, or should they change their minds, or should time and events simply overtake us and our usefulness to them. And so it was a very strange experience, Mr. Speaker, early on in my tenure here, and strangely perhaps that I remember it really well, the day I sat down on a joint House of Commons Senate committee, subbing for one of my colleagues next to a senator. And here was this man sitting on this committee nominally for the same purpose as the rest of us sitting around the table, reviewing and scrutinizing legislation, studying the issues of the day, with no one to go back to, no one to account to, no constituency, no events that weekend to get back to the riding for, just collecting a salary until the inevitable. Entirely unaccountable, Mr. Speaker. And this, Mr. Speaker, is to argue that the institution is fundamentally undemocratic, that it represents, in fact, a deep distrust of democracy. It is, and it does. It is a comforting backstop for those who are concerned about the wisdom of the elected, and by extension, the wisdom of the electors. There are facts aplenty, Mr. Speaker, served up over the course of time to undermine the justifications of that institution. But to focus on the issue of accountability, Mr. Speaker, seems a bit naive. There's an unassailable truth to those arguments, but there's a bigger truth that seems to make those finer, higher arguments somewhat moot, I think. The Prime Minister, he once described the Senate as a relic of the 19th century. Were it only that, Mr. Speaker, then there may be something quaintly historical about it, and some historical justification for keeping it alive, for reforming it, for modernizing it, perhaps. This argument might take the shape of tradition versus more modern democratic notions about institutions. But it's actually substantially worse and considerably sadder than simply that, Mr. Speaker. The institution, even for what it was, has degenerated and become corrupted beyond rehabilitation. It's not even about what the senators are doing here. It's not about what terms and conditions they operate under here. It's about what they've done to get here. The Senate is the pension, Mr. Speaker. The work's already been done. Their masters have been served, and this is the deferred compensation for that work. And now, I'm not a historian, Mr. Speaker, and maybe the institution knew better times. Maybe someone took seriously, well, the Liberals still do, apparently, the notion of second sober thought. On the other hand, some people say it's always been this. And I enjoyed the quote from my colleague, Sir John A., about this being the chamber of the propertied. But I only know what it's been, frankly, through my adult life. And it's been a crass, crude, and corrupted institution. And look what we have there, Mr. Speaker. We have Senator Doug Findlay, National Campaign Director for the Conservative Party, former campaign director and director of political operations for the Conservative Party in 2006 and 2008. And he was charged, Mr. Speaker, for overspending the Election Act spending limit, falsifying tax claims in the 2006 election. And over the last 3 years, he has cost the taxpayer just shy of $730,000. We have Senator Irving Gerstein, Chief Fundraiser and Chair of the Conservative Fund of Canada. He is the largest fundraiser for the Conservative Party and was charged in 2011 with violating the Elections Act, involved in filing false tax claims and exceeding federal spending limits on campaign advertisements. Senator Gerstein has cost the taxpayer just shy of $1 million over the last 3 years. And the list goes on, of course, Mr. Speaker. Bagmen, backroom boys, and failed candidates in the Senate. And not to be outdone, the Liberals have enshrined their own set of past political operatives in the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Senator David Smith, for example, former National Liberal campaign co-chair. Cost to the taxpayers over the last 3 years, $935,000. Senators Cowan, Robichaud, Mitchell, Campbell, all former Liberal Party operatives, all costing the taxpayer either side of $1 million over the last 3 years each, Mr. Speaker, and the list goes on. The Senate was never justified on any grounds, but at least the Red Chamber had the facade and aura of dignity, but no more. That has fallen away, and with it has gone the possibility of recovery. A seat in the Red Chamber is the crude patronage of a twisted, cynical political game that's been played out between those two parties since Confederation. It's the pork of political bagmen and operatives of Liberals and Conservatives. That party that wins the election gets to bring their insiders to feed at the trough of the Canadian Senate, wealthy enough men and women gorging themselves at the expense of the taxpayer for doing the dirty work of their party, Mr. Speaker. Reform, Senate reform, that's been the mantra of this Prime Minister, but there's been no rush, we note. He's had 7 years to deliver on that promise, and what he's delivered instead was 58 of his own to feed at the Senate trough, taking a seat ahead of all but 6 other Prime Ministers in the pantheon of patronage. Patrick Brazeau, Mike Duffy, Pamela Wallin, and Mac Harb. This is what it's come down to. Audits, investigations over housing allowance and travel expenses. Do you live where you say you live, Mr. Senator? It makes one wish we could go back to debating the principles and the value of the rhetoric, the relic, a debate without a different conclusion, but at least a debate of a higher order. But the plumbing's backed up on this relic, Mr. Speaker. There's no reviving it, not getting rid of the stench. This is an unconstitutional, undemocratic relic, deserved better than the crass feeding trough that it has become. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.